Good morning, everybody, and a happy Tuesday to you all. Welcome to Thrive, Not Just Survive. My name is Nasira Jamal, and I am your host. Now, I have been doing this since the beginning of COVID, and I have had the immense pleasure to interview different women entrepreneurs who, come to the show. They share their light, they share their genius with me. And today I have a really special guest. Her name is Julia, and she actually is a garden blogger and does all things garden related. And her journey is so powerful. And even with COVID, for her to rise to her other sort of her genius and find other things that she can do to help people that want to learn more about gardening, do gardening, find that sort of place where they can grow. And for a pun in words, growing for gardens is just is amazing. So I want to bring her on so we can start this conversation and see if there is any kind of nuggets of wisdom that you can get from her story that could help you as well. So let's get this conversation started. Hey, Julia, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so pleased.
Thank you so much for having me.
So as we talked before the show, but I'd like people to get a framework of sort of who you are and how you got to doing what you're really passionate about. So if you can kind of guide us through your story.
Sure. So I call my story BC and AC, before kids, after kids. So before my children, I lived in Toronto and I had a pretty busy career as a headhunter. So it was completely different. I placed people in companies, and I did that for a number of years. I even had my own firm, and I loved it. At the time, I loved it. I was extremely passionate about it, and it was a totally different life. I mean, I lived in a concrete condo downtown Toronto. There was nothing green about it. It was just, work. So when we decided to have children, my husband said, let's move to the country, let's move up north and let's raise our family there. So I moved up north, still had my office at home. But once we had the kids, I couldn't work anymore. The career that I had is all encompassing. And although I loved it, it was just that chapter of my life that was great. And then it was done because I committed to having children. So my children are 18 months apart. When we had my second child, when he was almost a year, we hired a nanny. And that nanny lived north of us. And at the time, we lived in a small town up north, and we had a really tiny backyard, but I wasn't interested in any kind of gardening. And she said, why don't you come to my house and my mom will make dinner and the kids can play with the llamas and they can swim in the pond. It'll be great. So we did. Okay. So we went over there and they had this incredible 300-acre property. And they had llamas and they had the pond and then they had this enormous vegetable garden. And I think that there was something inside me when I was little that, my parents didn't garden. I didn't come from gardening, but there was always something that attracted me to it. I just didn't think I could do it. I just thought it was, that's not for me. That's too much work. I can't do that. So when I saw her mom harvesting dinner from that garden and then we ate it and it was incredible, I just was like, this is the best thing ever. And I have to do this. So the nanny offered to bring llama poo and dig out my first garden. So the only spot we had at the old house was a tiny side yard. It was a 42-foot wide lot. So we only had the side of the house, and that was the only side that had sun. And it was basically the walking path. Anyways, we put my first garden there and, I didn't know anything. We just put it in the ground. I had 3 giant zucchini plants in there in a 16-foot spot, 6 tomatoes. I put lettuce and beans and all these things, all excited. And just, I sat back and then I saw bunnies come to the garden and eat it. They ate all the good stuff. And plus the zucchini grew and covered the whole thing. But what I learned from that experience was just how amazing it was to grow my own food. And that was so exciting for me. And, the ability to feed my children and my son, who is my second child, he didn't eat food. He didn't like much of anything. And so when I grew the carrots and he harvested the carrots from the garden and ate them. Like, this is why I planted this garden. I wanted to feed my kids the most organic and healthy food, chemical free, and know where it came from. And at the time it was, GMO and a lot of talk about GMO, and I was concerned. So, that's really why I did it. But the passion started then, and the yard was really small and I wanted more. So, I spoke to my husband and I kept, like, you moved me to the country, but I live in a small town lot. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I want land. And at the time it was fine. But once I got into gardening, 16 feet by 4 was just not enough, right? So we looked for a year and we found this place, and we have 25 acres and it's gorgeous. And, now I have all the space I wanted. And the thing is, like, over the years, I've learned a lot. And I've learned there's been a lot of mistakes, and, I think there's no mistakes. I think that mistakes are opportunities for learning. And this is, and no matter, anytime anyone feels they made a mistake, I never, I always say, no, that's great. Like, the mistake is great. You'll never do that again. And you just learn for the future. So I take every mistake as a learning opportunity. And, since then I've, done courses. I started my horticultural diploma through University of Guelph, and I'm reading all the time. And I just felt that, this information needs to come out there. Like, gardening is not a complicated thing. Growing your own food is really actually simple, but I think people make it really complicated by doing too much. And so my passion is to teach people how to grow their own food. And it's really not a big deal. It's really easy. And no matter how much you grow, if you grow enough of variety, if something doesn't work out, that's okay, because you still got to grow something, and it tastes better than buying it at a store. And right. It's going to always be better, coming from your own land. So
yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much, like, my husband he has a green thumb, loves gardening of any kind, flowers and vegetables and whatever he can get his hands on. And I can see, like, when he sees the tomatoes growing, the passion that, like, just him looking at them, it's like he's falling in love, the idea of him being able to do that and bring it into the house, and we use the vegetables, right? So it is it's really something that touches your soul in a very different, unique way. So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. So I want to touch on it just because I know your story a little bit. Before COVID, you were doing, because of this education piece, you were doing a lot of speaking engagements, right?
I was, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's going to continue once all of this sort of settles down and we kind of find a different normal in terms of getting that. But can you tell us, like, what kinds of things would you have been talking about so people could get more understanding?
So I have a number of topics. And so the last 4 years, I've been speaking at different horticultural societies and Seedy Saturday events. Seedy Saturdays they typically take place at the end of winter, and it's a place where, you could speak, but then there's also seed exchange and there's vendors. It's always a lot of fun. So, so I do, one of my talks is successful vegetable gardening. And on my website at juliadimakos.com, I actually have a little free ebook that shows you, like, the 10 steps that you can use to be successful in your own vegetable garden. Plus I have a supplementary 5-step. And so this is kind of what I cover in the talk. It's, all the basic steps that you would need to follow to be successful at vegetable gardening. So everything from, starting the garden, what you put in the beds, and watering, planting style, hardening off your seedlings. Like, if you're starting them indoors and you want to bring them out, you can't just stick them in the garden; they'll die. They need to be basically adjusted to the outside. And anyway, so that's basically my main topic. And then I also have other ones where, like, what do you do with the harvest after it's done? Because it's, like, you can harvest it all, but then it's all ready. And then what do you do with it? You need to figure out a way to make it last, and it'll just rot. It can't all be done. You can't just eat it all fresh. So I have a talk on that. And then I have a talk on succession planting, and I have a talk on seed starting. So I kind of cover everything you need to know to grow successfully.
That's amazing, because I think for some people it's intimidating, this whole idea, if they've never done it and they're like, I have no clue. And the reason I'm saying this, it's funny, yesterday or the day before on Sunday, my sister-in-law talked about this at the dinner table, and she said, I want to start a vegetable garden. And because my husband does this, he said, oh, I can build you a box. And then she was asking all these questions. Well, what do I do? How much soil? Can I plant now and I can still get some harvest before the end of the summer, and it's like a bit late now. And so there's a lot of learning if you've never done it before, right? So
Oh yeah. And it can be so intimidating because, if you don't know, like I didn't know when I started. And so I never thought I could do it because, I just thought, oh, that's so much work, and the thing is, I've always thought that you have to dig. You need to dig holes and dig your soil in order to make your soil workable. I don't dig a single hole. Like I don't believe in digging. I believe in planting into the soil. I believe in feeding the soil compost, and I believe in putting a hole in the ground and putting your plant in there. Now I can't grow in my ground here because I live on the escarpment and it's very rocky. So, things don't, unless it's a perennial, like I can't grow vegetables in there. You can't really dig a hole very easily. So, but the thing is, in my own raised beds, I mean, they're years old and I don't dig them over, and they just I just let them sit, and all the good soil microbes and worms and all that, they do the job for you, right? They just loosen the soil for you. So the more you feed it, the better it is. So really that makes it so much easier. So
right.
I think, but once, people realize it's not that complicated, it just makes it an easier task to, to try.
Well, I think that's the
themselves.
first step, right? Is if you're too afraid to say it's too much, I don't know what I'm doing, you may not even start. But if you have sort of a blueprint of how to just do it easily, starting with maybe like a small bed, right? And grow into it, as opposed to saying I'm just going to do this, full time and throw caution to the wind. I think it's a nice way of doing something and having success, because as you can see it growing, and then you get more inspired to say, I want to make this larger, or whatever fits your family in your lifestyle. So I want to talk to you post-COVID. So I know things have changed because obviously you're not speaking. So what is sort of the pivot that you've done in your business to be able to continue with this love that you have for gardening?
So I spend a lot more time on doing video than I have before. In the past, I didn't have a lot of time for it, but this year, my garden is bigger now than it's ever been. It's now 7,000 square feet. So over the years, I've grown it. It's expanded.
Wow.
So I didn't, that was also a learning experience for me, because you have to learn organizational skills that I've never been very good at being organized, but now I am. Now you have to get it all to work, and I'm just me. Nobody helps me. So what I do is I do a lot more video to show people how to do things, and that's on my YouTube channel. And it's because it's been so busy in the big garden, I haven't written as much, but I'm writing a book now. So this is, the pivot is I'm trying to relay the information through video and written work. And also my goal is to start consulting people on designing their own vegetable gardens, because this is what I do. Right. So
yeah. And because you've had so much experience and all of the learning curves that you've gone through in terms of, like you say, mistakes or learnings, you can probably shorten the curve for a lot of people if you can handhold them for that bit of starting, right? And
exactly.
Fall off saying, oh no, I can't do it, or this is too hard, whatever, right? So I think that's the key when you're working with an expert like yourself, who has done all of the work, who's figured out some things that have worked and some things that need tweaking. You could really help that person get more success quicker. So I think that's
absolutely.
That's so brilliant that you're able to consult and help people, because I do believe the consciousness is changing. I think people are changing the way they see food, how they're buying food, what are they ingesting. I think there's just a different level of awareness that's out there of saying, well, how is all of this food affecting me if I've got, whatever, pesticides, and you're thinking about all the foods that perhaps aren't as natural as they may seem.
Also, because of COVID, a lot of people have started new gardens this year, which is great. I love the trend that people are looking to grow their own food and trying. And so I think that there's a lot of new gardeners this year. And from what I've seen on social media, that there are a lot of, they just planted their first seeds this March, or, this spring. It was their first garden ever. So I think that's really great. And I'm finding that with COVID, people are they're trying to become more self-sufficient, and myself included. Like now we have bees, and, I'm getting more into medicinal herbs. And I believe that, the more that I could just manage my own family without having to resort to supply chain, I'd prefer that. So this is where I'm going. And so I think that, I think it's wonderful that people are, are interested in food and where their food comes from, and not relying so much and trying to grow it themselves.
So
Yeah.
I have a question for you. You said you have a 7,000 square foot garden. So I want to say, obviously, you can't feed that to your family. It's like, eat all of this before it rots. So tell me, what are you doing with it?
So my garden is there's 4 sections in it, and 1/4 of it is berries. So in that section, it's just berries. So I make jams and I freeze a lot of it for the winter. And then I have the new section, which is, it's 90 feet long. And in that space, I have all my tomatoes and my zucchini and my squash and all that summer loving veggies are in there. And so, I process a lot of it. I freeze it, and I've been giving away a lot of zucchini. I have to say, this year is one year that it's been it's been a really buggy year, but it's been a good year for zucchini. So that I'm just trying to process it all. But it's amazing because I don't grow enough of any one thing to sell. So I just grow so much variety that we always have different things happening, different foods, and so I don't really resort on the grocery store in the summertime and any produce. So I
So,
have enough of all that.
so then I have a question for you because obviously this is, we're in Canada and we only have so much of the time when you can be outside growing. What happens in the winter for you? Like, do you actually freeze your vegetables so that you can use them through the winter?
So certain vegetables can be stored. So I grow a lot of squash, and that can be stored. Then there's potatoes that can be stored, and other things I freeze or I process into fermented. So I make a lot of ferments. I do fermented pickles and beans, and now I started fermenting zucchini because I have so much. And then I make salts and I make syrups, and I just really just expanded from just eating straight vegetables to what you can do with them. And we also have a greenhouse here. So in the wintertime or into deep fall, I grow my own, I grow in the greenhouse. I grow the cool season veggies, so lots of lettuces. And then it starts again in March in my greenhouse. So it just kind of, there's like a 3-month off period between December and February, and then it starts to grow. So I'm always growing pretty much something. And then I do microgreens in the house and sprouts in the wintertime too. So we're always getting something.
Oh, you know what? That's brilliant. I mean, you've obviously made it as a lifestyle change and a lifestyle choice, which I think, for some it may be too much, but for others, it may be something that they want to maybe grow into. So I think it's so amazing that, from living downtown in a condo to moving to a place like this, where you've had this journey, this learning that's happened, which I just think it's so empowering to say it can be done. Like, for those that are
Oh
looking
yeah.
it can be done. And
I even harvest flowers and I make creams and salves. Like, there's just so much you can do. And I'm getting into tinctures too now, and I'm going to make hydrosols. Like, the thing is, because of COVID, like for myself personally too, like I want to become more self-sufficient. And because it doesn't take a lot, like you can I harvest red clover. It grows wild here on my field. So, there's things you can do, you can find and find uses for outside of just eating vegetables. And that allows me and us to be less dependent on the store. Like, I don't want to go out necessarily. I'd rather, because of COVID, I just want to stay home most of the time. So I'm always thinking, like, what can I do to expand my things that I need to survive without having to go to a store, which is really nice. And, the kids, they learn from that too. And, mom, what do you have for this? Or mom, what do you have for that? And I have it because, I do so much reading and trying out and trial and error. And so this is what I'm trying to focus more on teaching that as well to people, because there's just so much to do that you can.
And it's amazing that, as your children are growing up and they're seeing this, like obviously watching you do it. And it's great that you can instill this in them when they're young, right? So that they can continue perhaps with that journey on their own when they're old enough, and they can see the benefits of it and how they're feeling and what they can do with it. Like you said, you're not just eating raw vegetables. I mean, you've obviously expanded this much, much farther, but you've had quite a few years of learning and experimenting. But I think it's an amazing thing to just introduce it to our children when they're young, so they can actually be able to learn the benefits of how it can help them.
So I hope so, because they don't help me in the garden, and they find all of it very boring. Like, we have chickens and bees, and we have, vegetables and flowers and everything else. And right now I'm hoping they get it through osmosis. And I believe that when they grow up that they'll think that this is normal and we just grow our own food. So they'll just have gardens always, or
Right.
a pot, it doesn't have to even be a big garden. You can have it in containers. I just think that they will, even though right now they're not interested in participating in it, but they love eating it. So I think that they'll want that to continue when they're older, because they've grown up with it their whole lives now.
Yeah. And that's the thing though, right? With children, is with whatever we're doing, they grow up with certain ways, certain things, right? So it may
Mm-hmm.
not be that we're seeing them right away getting excited or jumping in saying, I want to help, but they are watching it daily, right? They're watching you do what you're doing. Even the idea of entrepreneurship, like you're exhibiting to them that really anything is possible. That if they really
Mm-hmm.
feel that that's what they want to do, they can totally do it, which I think is so much learning, right? It's by example rather than, teaching it at a blackboard to say this is how these things work, but to have life experience like this is pretty phenomenal. So I think that's brilliant, having the kids involved. So now I just want to kind of have I've just put up your Gardening Girl. So if people want to find you, they can actually put the @ symbol with Gardening Girl. They could follow you on YouTube, Instagram. They can contact you through your website, correct? Like if they had questions or
Yeah.
somebody wants to start a garden, they can
Yeah.
contact you here. Okay, perfect.
So that's my website. And if my email is just julia@juliadimakos.com. Very easy to find me.
Perfect. And on your website, is there like a contact page just so
I think there is. I believe there is at the bottom or on the About Me. There's
Yeah.
probably in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So is there anything you want to share with us that maybe as people are just kind of thinking about it of, where to sort of begin, or if they're just, what kind of advice would you give somebody who's just thinking about gardening or learning about it?
So I definitely suggest starting small. If it's your first garden, don't do everything. Don't plant everything you've ever dreamt of, because you are going to encounter some troubles. There's always troubles. There's troubles in my garden every year too. So you shouldn't start too big, because it's, first of all, you get exhausted, and if things don't work out and then there's pests and you don't know how to manage them, it'll be a turnoff. So I suggest starting small. Like if you've always dreamt of starting, just start a one raised bed, or do a few pots, and grow your favorite things. Like, did you want to grow tomatoes? Do you want to maybe do some cherries, cherry tomatoes? Maybe I wouldn't suggest a zucchini for the beginning unless you have the space to let it go, but maybe do some cucumbers. Like, just start small and then see what that's like. And then the next year, consider expanding if you're ready for more, but definitely start small, because doing too much can definitely be scary for people. And then also, don't worry if it doesn't work out. Like if you have trouble, if there's something that didn't grow, don't worry about it. If something did grow and another thing didn't, that's okay. And if you had pests one year, doesn't mean you're going to get them next year. Just try again. Don't give up. It's definitely rewarding, because there's nothing better than homegrown. Go outside, you harvest your own food. It tastes amazing. It didn't have to come from a store. I mean, there's nothing better. So whatever you can grow, that's great. And if something didn't work out, don't worry about it. Just try again next year.
And that's the whole thing, right? Like it's like a science experiment, because if you've never done it before, then you're going to not exactly have all the answers. And as you go through it, like you said, is not to give up, to say, okay, well, that didn't work, but that's okay, right? You could do something else, or don't let it defeat you, saying, I just can't do this, right? So I think that's a mindset game anyways, where one can just look at it and say, that's a learning. Next time I'll plant something different or something else, or just learn about how to plant that particular thing in a way that it will be successful.
Right.
So I think when you take it on as, it's just an experiment, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try small and then grow into it. I think that's probably a better recipe for success than if, like you said, having a large area and then it goes out of control.
Exactly. And weeds will come. So you got to stay on top of them, and you can't just plant it and be like, okay. And then you don't water it, you don't take care of it. You do need to attend to it and check on it and pull out the weeds as they come and water it. That's all really, really important. And I think that some people maybe do too much and don't realize that that's another important step. And then maybe it becomes overwhelming. But, any mistake is, again, a learning experience. So if you do it once and that was a mistake, then you won't do that mistake again. You'll just do something different, and that you'll find what does actually work. And over time, as you get experience, those answers will come to you a lot easier. You'll just know what to do. You'll just figure it out because you'll know that from experience, these things worked. Okay, so I'm going to try this again, and this will work again. Like this, they all the same systems can be applied across the board to different vegetables and different things.
Elements, right? You also have to look at sort of where the sunshine is. If you're doing it in your backyard, like what area is the best spot to start it in, right? I mean, there's so many different variables that have to be considered. Like some plants need shaded area, some plants need direct sun. So there's again that learning curve that has to go into it because you may not know all of those answers when you begin.
Exactly. And if it's really windy, sorry, say that again.
I said, that's why hiring a consultant like you is a really good idea, because then you can actually say, look, this is your spot. This is probably the best. These items are, or these vegetables are the best to start in this particular type of area, so that the success rate is much higher.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea that, if you consult somebody who's just starting out and help them, they would just feel better knowing that they've got somebody there that could, they could reach out to saying, I don't know what to do next, or, whatever, right? Whatever kind of problems that might come up. I do have a question for you in terms of, I've seen a lot of inside gardens, like with lights and, they're actually like contraptions that you can put on your table or your countertop. What is your, would you suggest if somebody now is starting, like it's almost the end of August, would you say that would be a good place to start maybe throughout the fall and winter and kind of get their feet wet?
Yeah. So that's those little systems. They're very cute to grow. They're great for growing herbs, and they're a great way to start. And you can have your herbs growing all year. So basically, what they are grow lights, right, in a small little compact unit. And they sell really cute little versions of them that you could put like basil, and you could put your parsley or chives or whatever it is that you want to grow. Easily will grow in there. And then you can also grow like a dwarf cherry tomato, because there are ones that only grow to like this size, if you can see, like in a that would only need a 4 or 6 inch pot, and you'll get some cherry tomatoes. And that it wouldn't be abundant, but it would still be delicious because you could still harvest a few, and that tastes better than anything in the store anyway. And so that's a great way to start. Now I have if you're going to be starting a lot of seeds, you can have grow shelves, and you can make them inexpensively using shop lights or LED lights and some inexpensive shelving from the hardware store. And then you could put trays of things in there, and it can grow all winter long as well. And you can start your seeds on there. But those little systems are great if you're just starting and you just want to have some herbs. They're perfect. Some lettuce will grow in there beautifully. You can put a little spinach in there, whatever you like.
And I think
that's peppers.
Especially for somebody just starting out, and through the winter, now that we're sort of at the end of summer almost, is something to say, well, let's just start doing something where we could see some success, right? The idea is that feeling you get when you actually see something growing that you can eat. I know for me, like I don't garden, but my husband does. And when I go out to the garden and look at these tomatoes, and I'm just amazed that it's coming out of the garden. Like it just amazes me every time I go back there. So having it in the house and trying it with herbs, and like you said, even the cherry tomatoes and
or even hot peppers even would grow. They're small plants. They could easily grow in one of those little systems too.
Right. So you know what? I think that's another really cool thing for people that are just beginning to get that experience until spring again, and maybe try the gardening outside. And of course, there's all the stuff that they would probably need more information, which they can go to your website. I'm assuming that there's lots of tips there, and your YouTube video.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably, it's a good place to start if somebody's looking at just getting some information to begin. So I want to thank you. You know what? I mean, obviously we can talk for hours because this is such a great conversation. But I really appreciate the time that you've taken to even just sort of debunk some of the fears that somebody might have of just starting. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. I'm so glad. So I just want to say goodbye to you, and I want to just encourage people to get a hold of you through your website or follow you on YouTube or Instagram, just to, kind of get more of an idea of, even if they wanted to get consultation from you, they could reach out to you there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they can send me on my Facebook page, Gardening Girl. They can also send me a message there, and I can answer them there as well. It's another great way to contact me.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. I wish you a wonderful day. I hope I will see you in the pink tank. I know you're part of my Facebook group, so thank you so much for being there as well. I'll see
My
you soon.
pleasure.
Okay. So there you go. You see, it's not as difficult as one might think, because some things are just our fears holding us back. And it's so amazing that, Julia walked us through sort of the steps of how to do this. If you've never done it before, or maybe you've tried it and you haven't succeeded and you want to try it again, it gives you this sort of a blueprint of where to start. Please reach out to her. Like if you have questions, or you want to follow her and just see the videos, and there's so much things that you can do when somebody's just a few steps ahead of you in already having done that. So that's it for today. I encourage you guys to, follow your passion, follow your heart. Remember to be kind to yourself and others. I will see you tomorrow with another great person that I'm interviewing. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.